one of the main key features of horses is that they're a herd animal. And that's one of the reasons why they're so good at this work, is because they function very overtly, I would say maybe on the front end, as a relational group. So they're constantly doing attachment work.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, surely we bring some of our own stuff to it. And I'd say there's kind of two parts. Well, there's lots of parts, but two parts I'll talk about right now with equine work. One is just the psychoeducation component. Like, we get to see and observe how horses move through their stress response cycle or move through their attachment styles. Because a horse does bring their own attachment styles. But surely, like I said, because they're a herd animal, they're always doing a lot of relational work. And it's very subtle work.
Welcome to the Faithful and True podcast. I'm Randy Evert, your co-host, and we are here with Greg Miller, as usual, as our leader. And Greg, it's great to see you.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Well, the last podcast went so well with Rebecca Dekkers as our guest that everyone's going to notice that we're wearing the same outfits.
What?
Yeah, that's right. You looked so good last time. Let's keep with that. Well, Rebecca is back with us today. She did us the huge favor of writing the feature article for the Faithful and True Recovery Report for March, in which she kind of shared the news all about the upcoming equine therapy to be offered here at Faithful and True. Rebecca, great to have you back with us.
Well, thanks for having me.
All right. So you're going to talk all about equine therapy.
Let's just start at the beginning and kind of both personally, how did you get involved with equines, with horses, and then what was that transition for you into bringing it into the work you do professionally?
Well, I always had a great desire to work with horses. I always liked horses. I didn't grow up with them, but just between you and me and a few hundred of our listeners, I lied and I got my first job at a horse farm. And I said, I know how to ride, and I think I'd been on a horse once or twice. And so I got this job working with horses when I was 15, 16. And I just loved it. I learned a lot. I fell off, broke some bones, but I loved working with horses. And so then I followed along with that for a number of years, working at kids camps. And did trail riding and helped with that. Then we got away from horses for a while, and we got a horse. Finally, our kids got to an age, and I really wanted to get back involved again. And so we got back into horses and started purchasing a few. And then I worked for a number of years with a cutting horse trainer, and I rode for him. That was my job for a number of years, is riding, and did a lot of mucking stalls.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, prior to that discretion on the application, what was your exposure to horses? Like, was it through movies? Was it through just every once in a while driving and seeing a horse? Like, what was that invitation? Was it books?
Yeah, all of the things, books, movies, anytime we saw a horse, like needing to go over to it. Just really, I did not have much exposure, but it was like, if I could see or get near a horse, I wanted to be near one.
Big fan of Mr. Ed.
Yeah.
Was it true that you really had no fear of horses?
Yes.
Is that part of it too? So that you saw them, you were just drawn to them, intrigued by them?
Yeah,
Okay.
I love all animals, really. And so any animals, it wasn't just horses, but I think for a lot of kids, a lot of little girls, horses are particularly a draw. And so that was for me.
Good. So how did it go from the working professionally with horses, cutting horses, to recognizing that there could be a value of horses in a therapeutic setting? Hey, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Maybe you know it, maybe you don't. How long have horses been used in clinical therapy? Do you know anything about that?
That's a good question. It's relatively new as a trained professional modality. And surely it came on board first primarily for like veterans. That was for sure the first place it was used. And then for a while, I would say the growth was in more occupational therapy, like for physical therapy on horses. And I would say, you know, there are a couple of training groups like PATH and EGALA that have been around a long time, and they, a long time as in probably less than 40 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so a while, but not super long.
Yeah.
Yeah. But now it's growing, and so there's a number of different groups that do
Right.
a lot of specific training for mental health with horses.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think one of the things that we regularly talk about is how the whole field of engaging trauma and
Yeah.
being trauma informed and having a variety of different modalities to deal with trauma. And my sense is that equine therapy has been a part of the increase in trauma focus.
Yeah.
This has been one of the modalities that has kind of grown with the focus on trauma.
Yeah, definitely. And there's, you know, a lot of really great reasons why. And the training modality or the training group that I'm certified through is, or trained through, is undergirded with a couple of foundational principles, and one of them definitely is trauma-informed. The other is that it's neurodevelopmental or interpersonal neurobiology, a lot of Dan Siegel's work, and a lot of the work by Bruce Perry on his neurosequential model. So trauma and neurodevelopment and attachment, really, are some of the key principles that sort of undergird the training group that I'm trained with.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about attachment. So is the idea, as a person, I bring my attachment style to the horse, and some sort of interaction with the horse is going to help maybe expose my attachment style, but then also kind of challenge me to reorient my attachment style based upon my interaction with the horse.
Yeah, definitely. And there's one of the main key features of horses is that they're a herd animal. And that's one of the reasons why they're so good at this work is because they function very overtly, I would say maybe on the front end, as a relational group. So they're constantly doing attachment work.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, surely we bring some of our own stuff to it. And I'd say there's kind of two parts. Well, there's lots of parts, but two parts I'll talk about right now with equine work. One is just the psychoeducation component. Like we get to see and observe how horses move through their stress response cycle or move through their attachment styles. Because a horse does bring their own attachment styles. But surely, like I said, because they're a herd animal, they're always doing a lot of relational work. And it's very subtle work, which I think is another neat thing about horses, because they're nonverbal,
Right.
Unless it's Dr. Ed. I mean, that was
Mr. Ed.
before my time, yeah.
Mr. Ed, I'm showing my age again.
But they're nonverbal, but they're using a lot of communication all the time. Their bodies are always telling us a lot. And so in that really quiet place that we need to get to in order to be with, it's a lot of practicing being with the horses, we get to slow down and come to a quieter place and really observe what's coming up for us with attachment style. Am I wanting to do nearness? Am I wanting to be touching them all the time? Or am I wanting to, or does it feel really scary when they come close? And all of sort of my perhaps, and that's going to be a little too superficial to say, but perhaps do I prefer a greater distance and more of an avoidant attachment style? But that's all part of the discussion. Yeah.
Okay, so because they are a herd animal,
Yeah.
do you see like enmeshment and codependency among the horses? Like in the same way we can have healthy attachment, can horses also have some unhealthy patterns in the way that they're codependent with each other? Or actually, that's part of the beauty of horses. They're always good about maintaining their own personal boundaries relationally.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. There's a number of stories I could tell about it. But one thing that I would say is horses are a herd animal. They also operate with a pecking order. And so we, primarily on my property now, we have just mares, which means female horses. And the horses work with a pecking order. And depending on the leader, now granted, there's not always a playover, right? Like humans and horses operate very differently. But depending on the lead mare, there can be a real different tone. We had a lead mare who was not the nicest. And she...
You don't want to say anything
Yeah,
disparaging.
yes,
That's-
yes.
What's true is
She may be listening.
Yes, right. But she bred a lot of insecurity in the herd. And so if she would move away, like if we took her off the property, we had a horse blast through the fence trying to get at her because there was so much insecurity in the herd. Right now we have a really wise, regulated mare who can use her neocortex. That's a lot of other things we talk through. And she sets a completely different tone. And so everybody can be there. There's a lot more ability to move away and move towards. They're not quite so anxious when they're on their own, all of those things. So yes, that's, I guess, a way to say that they can demonstrate a lot of different anxieties, and it can depend on the system.
just a question. What are the factors that determine who the lead person is in the pecking, or the horse is in the pecking order?
Yeah. Well, sometimes you have to care. You have some horses who could care less, whether they are battling for on top. Surely you can tell who is the lead by who gets the feed first, who gets the hay. There's a little saying, who moves their feet is not probably the lead, or is not the lead, because she can stand still and she can look at somebody and send somebody else away. And so you're looking at things like that. But it does have to do often with desire, with, I would say, wisdom, or it could be aggression. Either one of those could be more determinant. But also their ability to regulate themselves, and emotional intelligence. There can be greater degrees of emotional intelligence with the horses also. So those are
what's fascinating is, as you're talking about these things, these are some of the same things that we talk about to our clients about how they relate and who has the power in their life, or who are they giving the power to, or, and so it makes perfect sense that part of the experience is in some way seeing some aspect of my life in the dynamic of the horses.
Yeah.
I once heard someone in talking about equine therapy, part of the value of it is, in some way, the horses are mirroring back to us something that we can see about ourselves.
Well, and they would surely be a safe place for us to learn a lot about ourselves. One of the principles is that the relationship is the vehicle for change. And so that the horses are offering a safe place for me to practice some of my relational skills. They do definitely offer us clear feedback on ourselves. And so to your point, feeling that sense of mirroring, they are, some other things about horses. So they're herd animals. They're also very congruent. And that's another thing we often practice in our sessions is congruence. If I'm not really aware of what's going on for me, and I'm not able to name what my state is, what my emotions are, even before I go in the pen, not always, depending on the horse. Like I have one who's like a golden retriever and will love anyone. But some of the other ones, they're going to be less likely to engage if you're not congruent. And isn't that an interesting thing? I think because the horses experience it not dissimilar to like a neurobiological lie. We talk sometimes even with anger for kids, if they grew up in a household where mom said, I'm not angry, with a pierced lip, like I'm not angry. The kid does feel that there's an incongruence. And again, I would use that like a neurobiological lie. I don't know what to make of your outside not matching what I'm sensing from your body. And the horses are very similar to that. And so us being able to practice being really aware of what's going on inside my body and bringing it to conscious awareness. And then doing that slow work of noticing, like what you said, what the horse elicits from me, what I'm aware of in my relational style, what insecurities come up, what's all happening for me.
So as we're moving towards including equine therapy as something that we're able to offer here at Faithful and True, what's the population? What's a group? What are the conditions that really lean towards participating in some sort of equine experience?
Well, really, we can work on about anything with equine-assisted psychotherapy. It really is. One of the things that I think is unique about offering it here at Faithful and True is, I think we would all know that tagline that we're hurt in relationship and we're also healed in relationship. And so in the area of relational betrayal, we often on the front end, we could say, yeah, that makes sense for a lot of the wives. They've been hurt in relational betrayal. And that causes all that chaos inside them of like, I hurt, I want to turn to you. You're my safe attachment, but I can't. You're the one who hurt me. And all of the chaos that comes with that. And so I think it makes sense that we offer it for wives. But I would say also we know from our work that a lot of the men we work with have experienced relational betrayal somewhere in their story. And so that same looking at utilizing, making benefit of the relationship as the vehicle for change, that I get to do some of my slow, quiet work in the presence of a safe other.
Right.
Because there really is two kind of key parts to equine-assisted psychotherapy. One is working on the relationship, working on my sense of connection, my connection to myself, my connection to a safe other. How can I determine if someone's safe, if they're not safe?
Right.
All of the relational skills around needs, and that needs inherently come with pressure. And how do we manage that pressure? We can do all of our work around that, but also, especially in light of trauma, like you said, the ability to regulate. How can I bring a regulated self to this hard thing, or a more regulated if right now I'm living in chaos, I'm living with current stress.
Right.
And how can I learn from the horses how to complete the stress response cycle?
Yeah, so the idea is, what can I learn from the experience with the horses, and what can I practice in the experience with the horses? And kind of like what you've identified, when there has been such significant relational betrayal, the context of the relationship is no longer safe. And so one of the hardest things to do is to try to practice different approaches and different relational skills in an unsafe environment. And so to be able to kind of explore and engage a part of myself where I'm not at the potential of hurting someone else or manipulating somebody else, but to be able to do that with an animal, then again, whatever I learn, I can take to my other relationships.
Yeah, because one of the things, you said something in the last podcast too, like one of the things we talk about it like is a good relational concept or a good relational skill is helpful in all of my relationships. And it's the same with horses. Like you said it in reference to groups, like I practice it here and then I can take it to my other system, the rest of my life. And it's the same with horses. I can practice a new skill here where there's, not a history. I'm not risking quite as much. And I can practice that back in my other relationships.
What also is interesting is for many of us, we try to maneuver our relationship with our words, and that we've been taught to try to explain ourselves or to justify, and so words become an important part of how we do relationship. So my guess is it's pretty significant to be in a relationship where words really have no meaning. Tone may, and I can't tell you the number of times I've had conversations with couples and someone will say, it's not what you say, it's the tone.
You say it.
And so it's actually getting to practice and be aware of my own tone, when the words are not as important as they are in the context of a relationship.
Well, I think Gottman points out that I think up to 70% of our communication is all the nonverbals. And even I would want to say a lot of our own nervous system regulation. That idea of neuroception, that I can feel on some level what's going on for you. I might not have words for it. I might not be able to name it, but we can feel a lot of dysregulation in each other. And the horses are pretty responsive to that. And so they're going to give us a lot of feedback around and help us work on all of those nonverbals. I do think it is an interesting part, like you said, when, what happens to me relationally? How do I show up when language is taken right out of the equation? I don't get to neocortex it with you. I have to be greater in my body. You said something also in the last podcast in regards to experiencing it. We can talk about things. We can talk about it's those moments where I get to experience something different that have often a deeper change.
Right.
Sometimes equine-assisted psychotherapy feels slower because I think we want to talk about it. We want to come. I always do this because it's Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain. I should explain why I keep tapping my knuckles. But we want to talk about it. We want to just come to quick solutions. And sometimes we can talk about it, and it's a different type of knowing when it's experiential.
I think one of the mistakes that we make is if we can talk about it and believe we understand it, then that guarantees change.
Yeah.
But just because I can understand it and talk about it doesn't mean it's going to change. And I do think that that's part of the power of experiential therapy is you're actually embodying it holistically. All parts of you are present in the experience. And so I can imagine that, when you're in that equine experience, you're present with your body. You can see things, you can smell things, you can hear things, and that invites you to be more holistically present.
When even just like you referenced earlier, like were you nervous about horse? Like it is 1,200 plus pounds right there. You feel it in your body that there's there's a grounding effect from that alone. There's a big presence right here in front of me. And you ask that question, like who would be appropriate for this type of work? And again, I would want to say like there's openness to anybody, but also sometimes I do think it makes sense in light of the people that we work with that sometimes it's a little farther along, that maybe right away on someone's recovery journey, we've got a lot of stabilizing and a lot of understanding. Where are we? What's addiction? What's going on in our life? What are my options? But as we slowly notice, I've gathered a lot of information, and I'm needing to maybe find it in the lower regions of my brain, in my other knowing. That's maybe when it becomes a good time to incorporate something like this.
I would even say probably for that person that has been in recovery for a while and they are struggling getting out of their brain and cognition. They're still explaining, they're still using words, and they do need something that isn't just brain dependent, that invites them to be more embodied. That could be a good time and a good resource for somebody.
Yeah. And then, so much truth in that. And then we could like inverse it and say sometimes for some of us, we can't do some of the relational work until we've learned to regulate. And for others, we can't regulate until we are in relationship.
Right.
And so really, it's a conversation with your therapist to say, where am I getting stuck on this? Because sometimes I cannot find a more regulated nervous system unless I have someone to attune to and connect with and be with.
Right. And the idea of what I'm hearing is so much of this is relational work. So if there are aspects of me that are missing, that I struggle with, that maybe developmentally as a child I didn't get some of the relational skills that I needed because they were absent or they were kind of modeled in unhealthy ways, this is a safe place to come and work on my relationship skills without continuing to hurt my spouse as I try to engage her or him. I often use the image, if you ever watch the Olympics and you watch the ice skaters, they're the pairs ice skaters, and they're doing all this stuff and they're twirling and they're lifting and all that type of thing. But the thing we don't see is all of the practice that goes into that and all the times that people were dropped and injury and all that kind of stuff. But before you even practice, you practice in safe environments. You practice with harnesses. You practice over water. There are things that you do to be safer. And this is kind of like that early practice in a very safe environment to start to develop some of those relationship skills. Do you find it's helpful for a couple to come together in a shared experience? Or is it more beneficial for them to come independently, have their own experience, and then at some point integrate that into their coupleship?
Well, I would say it can be really wonderful to do as a couple because there is something about watching your partner do their work. There's a greater intimacy and a greater sometimes understanding as we watch. And as we get to experience it together. So yeah, there's plenty of openness to doing it together. It can be powerful also.
My assumption is, in order for it to be effective for the couple to be there together, there has to be some level of commitment for there not to be a critical or judgmental perspective.
Yeah.
That if it's going to be a safe experience, it's our willingness as a couple to bring our safety to the experience, which means we're not going to be critical, we're not going to be judgmental. We're not going to have overreactions. And that then allows the equine experience to be safer, which means it's going to be more vulnerable, which means it's going to be more transformative.
Yes. Yep. I think that's well said. It is in some ways not dissimilar to some of the work we do just in our human groups, that we get to practice it in another place, some of those same principles.
If I were to come, would I be assigned a horse? Or is it a deal where the horse chooses you? Or are there times where all the horses are there and I'm kind of becoming a part of the herd? What if I was just to go through the process, work with my therapist, what are some of the expectations that I could have?
Well, I think that's a good question. Maybe I'll start even from the beginning. So normally when I do an outside session like this, an equine-assisted session, normally we would go for a walk because some of it is about nature and learning to regulate and know what's going on for me. So we would have a conversation while we walked because, again, I can't bring congruence to the experience unless I know what's going on for me. And we'd be using nature and other grounding skills to help come into that more thoughtful in my body place. And then, as far as would I be assigned a horse or would I not, it would all depend. If you were somebody coming with a great deal of anxiety and nervousness around horses, I might make a selection for you. And if there's some sense of I can feel okay in this experience, then probably more like what you said, we would probably be near the herd and be doing a lot of learning around and watching. We have to learn a little bit about safety and to know even what we're looking at with the horses because there is so much communicating going on. And so for us to even know, as I practice entering into a relationship with the horse, for me to have any language around what are they telling me, we would do some learning around that. And then for most people, there would be a lot of freedom for them to choose who they might feel a draw towards. And again, like all things, we always have choices. So if that feels like that's not going to be a horse that they're feeling connected to, we would talk through what connection feels like, but they would get to make another choice.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and even in the disconnection, I learn something about myself if I'm not drawn to this particular horse. It certainly could be who in my life does this horse's energy remind me of that I'm not wanting to engage or feel threatened by or I'm having some sort of negative reaction.
Yeah, when even, like you said, all the things that come up if a horse turns away from me and I go to self-doubt and it must be about me versus the horse just saw some grass it wanted. Am I personalizing everything?
Right.
Or am I easily swayed by the overly aggressive horse who's all up in my grill and in my face? That's a lot of information about how I feel chosen and how I do some of my relational stuff.
At what point are we ready to start scheduling somebody who might hear this podcast, see this podcast, and go, I would love to get involved with that?
Yeah, good question. So I mean, there already is some openness to it.
Okay.
So I already have some clients that I'm seeing for equine work through Faithful and True in addition to my other clients. But technically April 1st, we're going to start, partly because Minnesota weather is complicated.
Right.
And so hopefully it's a little bit warmer and dry by then.
Yeah.
April 1st-ish.
Great. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. This is a subject that we have been eager to talk more about. Your article in the newsletter was fantastic. And so we would invite you, if this opportunity sounds great for something you'd like to get involved with, call or contact us at faithfulandtrue.com. where we'll be able to direct you to the openings that are available. Okay, so thank you for helping us today. And Greg, you sounded so knowledgeable about horses, especially about Mr. Ed. So we hope that this has been beneficial to all of our viewers and watchers today. The Faithful and True website has got lots of resources available to you. There's over 550 podcasts like this one, so we invite you to check us out. We also have the online registration and information and registration about our 3-day intensive workshops. We do the Men's Journey Workshop every month. We do the Women's Journey Workshop 3 to 4 times a year, and the same thing with our 2 various couples workshops. So check that all out at faithfulandtrue.com. In the meantime, thank you for joining us today, and we hope that the coming week for you will be a week that's filled with many blessings and with great vision.